Hello and welcome to this Serial Geek TV episode commentary for Roll For It, an episode of The Transformers produced by Marvel Productions. My goodness, where to start with Transformers? Actually not at the start. So yeah, rather than starting off with the three-part More Than Meets the Eye, I thought I'd tackle this episode as it's one I remember as a kid, much like all those first season episodes that aired on the Roland Rat show and then subsequently Wackaday. It's bizarre to think that for most kids in the UK, our viewing of Transformers initially was broken up into 5-minute chunks. Seriously, I'm not joking when I say that to this day, I can still recall where the episode would start and end each day. And that's pretty much true for this episode too. I will start off by saying that there are so many animation inconsistencies. I'm not going to call them errors, even though they are, because at this point early in production of the series, the show was being shipped out to a variety of animation teams, even studios, with a variety of animators, each with their own take on the characters, the way they should move and transform. And look, I'm just kind of making excuses now, aren't I? And here we are with the Decepticons. It's interesting that this episode starts off as a soft continuation of the previous episode in which Megatron was seemingly defeated, something that happened more than a few times in this initial season. Yeah, the Decepticons here, stealing energy. Energy and Energon cubes were what the Decepticons were all about in this first season. So yeah, the oft-mentioned Toidoga, who I wax lyrical about all the time, helmed the animation for the first season. But this episode, it's unlike most of their other episodes, as the work was outsourced by Toei to Ashi Productions, who also worked on shows like Mask and The Real Ghostbusters, and these studios, and their various teams and animators working on this episode, each had their own very unique style.
It sure is.
Thundercracker. John Stevenson's voice was just awesome. That really deep, always made me laugh when he was able to reach those lows and then the ridiculous highs of Beef Bonk in Galaxy High School. I never put the two together until many years after the series had aired. And yeah, you can tell there's either some glaring mistakes in the storyboard or, more than likely, the animation teams across studios simply weren't communicating with one another, because watch Starscream's escape coming up.
Decepticons retreat.
We get this wonderful shot of him blasting into the air next to Optimus. Then we see him take to the skies again. Watch this next sequence. Ignore the Soundwave comedy run sequence. I'm not sure what was going on there. But look at this sequence with Prowl and Bluestreak bombing around the corner and transforming. Although Prowl does turn into... It's awesome. Soundwave Scream is hilarious. A few years back, actually, the awesome brothers that run the fantastic resource website Transformers at the Moon uncovered many original voice acting sessions for the first and second season and possibly beyond. They're pretty incredible to listen to, as you hear many unprocessed voices, deleted scenes, removed and alternate pieces of dialogue. Really awesome stuff. But yeah, in these recordings you hear Frank Welker performing that Soundwave Scream without his voice processed, and it's rather amusing. Here we are in outer space. I always thought it was unique that the artist painted the space over Cybertron blue. I mean, that opening shot in More Than Meets the Eye Part 1 is nothing but blue outer space. And it's an interesting design choice, but it works really well. Yeah, here we are on Cybertron with good old loyal Shockwave and Megatron. It's funny, much like a few of the cartoons of the 80s, Transformers is a show that has two continuities running at the same time. The cartoon and the comic, even though their beginnings both started at Marvel Comics. But yeah, in the comics, Shockwave is a fascinating character. He spent many years trying to usurp the leadership of the Decepticons. He and Megatron go toe-to-toe in some rather epic battles, and towards the end of the original Transformers comic book run, Shockwave was still a prominent figure, almost like a leader or a second-in-command numerous times. But there is a reason I bring up Shockwave specifically. Listen to this piece of dialogue coming up.
Billion astroseconds.
Have a safe journey, Megatron.
The way Corey Burton delivers Shockwave's line, it's the only time in the series where it sounds like Shockwave is plotting something or hoping that Megatron does not survive the trip back to Earth and utterly fail in his mission. One more thing about Shockwave, you have no idea as a child in the UK how frustrating it was that he wasn't released in our country. I'll never forget being at school and one kid who had been to America on holiday was telling us about the Shockwave toy, and we just didn't believe him at the time. But years later we would obviously be proven wrong. But I do love and kind of miss that early aspect of Transformers, to be honest. Like when one of my school friends actually owned a red Trax. And we couldn't figure out why this version of Trax was red, even though he was red on the back of the box, if you remember that gorgeous illustration. Oh, be sure to look at the size of Bumblebee here. Yes, Transformers change size during their transformation. That's nothing we haven't seen before, but Bumblebee here, compared to his size in the More Than Meets the Eye 3 part, is crazy. Also, go back and watch that transformation. Regardless of the size issue, it is beautifully timed, mixing ones and twos to create a real dynamic burst of movement. Oh, also, yeah, we didn't get Reflector as a toy either. Don't ask me why. In this episode, Chip Chase has some really anime-inspired looks. In certain scenes, he has really big eyes and cool anime hair where it's just big and almost somewhat uncontrollable. It's always interesting to see Reflector in the first season. He was a character that was legitimately written out before season 2. It's a shame because I always thought you could do more with him than most. So now we're in a bright orange laboratory. Looks like the artists thought they were illustrating the interior of the Autobots Ark again. Look at the size of Bumblebee here. He's far too small. What is he, 7-8 feet in these shots? Look at these eye blinks on Chip coming up. He looks at this disc and he does these blinks. This is pure anime. Get ready for this shot. It's a gorgeous looking shot as well. Look at this. Doink, doink, doink. Gorgeous. So yeah, here's Spike's about to say that they should head for the underground parking entrance. But from what we've seen thus far, they appear to be in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, sadly, the animators, director, camera operator, whoever, forgets to include the laser fire here and the explosions that cause this damage just magically appear.
They got away.
In this group shot of the Decepticons, look at Reflector. That is pure Japanese robot illustration, human-like proportions, but with very powerful poses. Kind of reminds me of the way American comic book artist Arthur Adams draws his male and female characters, especially in the 80s. Also, this is a video for another time, but I always felt that Robots in Disguise was kind of lost when they introduced the Dinobots, because no one's going to be fooled by a giant robotic dinosaur. Yeah, this is a bit of a bizarre plot point. I kind of get it, but I never did like the idea of the Decepticons stealing airplane parts in order to repair themselves. It doesn't feel convenient, it just feels a bit silly. I always love seeing Prowl and Bluestreak together as well. Bluestreak, awesomely voiced by the late Casey Kasem. What a career that guy had, my goodness. Oh, I should bring up a quick fact. So, a few years back, I went to a warehouse in Los Angeles. No, not the Filmation warehouse I visited over the years, but a warehouse that dealt with office equipment. Randomly, the owner had acquired a lot, and I mean a lot, of early development artwork for the Transformers, much of which I'll feature on this channel. Oh, before I go on, listen to this unprocessed Frank Welker laugh here. That always tickles me. Anyway, the artwork in the warehouse I mentioned. I sold much of it online but kept some pieces back for myself because they mean the world to me. One such piece is an original character model cell of Bluestreak when he was actually blue, like the original toy, which you can see in the first Transformers catalogue that came with the figures. I'll make a video at some point about all my findings because there's a few pieces of history in there that I don't think people have ever seen. Also, I don't mind Rumble being human-sized, by the way, because we'd seen him human-sized in the first 3 episodes of Transformers. That said, wasn't the toy the same size as Bumblebee? I really shouldn't get into a discussion about the varying sizes of the toy, should I? Oh yeah, so look at Chip Chase's monitor in this next shot. There. So many years ago, Serial Geek magazine contributor John Talfer brought this to my attention, which I believe is now a widely known fact. The text on the screen that we see is actually a somewhat rude joke included by the Japanese animators referencing the popping of one's cherry. Let's just leave it there, maybe. So with these episodes, I honestly believe that the writers were pretty much winging it. Yes, they had a series bible to work from with explanations of the character personalities, the world they inhabited, but throughout this first season we see numerous examples of one-off story points. A character having a weapon in their arm just for the moment they need it to be there. Like here when Prowl's battle computer is damaged. The first and only time we hear about a Transformers having a battle computer. Don't get me wrong, it's a cool scene and a great deal of fun when you watch this, but when you want to talk about pushing the limits of our accepting of fantasy, here we have Prowl randomly reach out via the early days of modem technology, and somehow out of all the people in America with a modem at the time, which granted weren't many, but he happens to go directly to Chip Chase, friend to the Transformers, Not only do we have that bizarre coincidence, but we also see that Chip Chase's computer can perfectly display Prowl's vision. Bear in mind, computers in the early 80s were lucky to display more than just a few colours. I should know, we had an Amstrad CPC 464 and a Spectrum back in the day. You were very lucky to have decent visuals. Sorry, I'm going on a rant here about old computer technology. Though it is nice to see Chip contributing so heavily to this episode. I always did like Chip Chase. It's a real shame they kind of got rid of him. Also, this is all dependent on Chip Chase also being able to pilot a fighter jet. I know he's a genius, but come on. The animation on the missiles here is really nicely animated. I think we get another shot of it.
Get out of here!
There we go. My goodness, how many times have the Decepticon jets been mixed up? And we just saw 2 Decepticon jets exit the hangar bay there. And now yeah, but there was... Oh, I don't know. Yeah, if you look at Thundercracker, he seems to change colour from scene to scene. Coming up, look at this shot of Megatron. Look how detailed he is there. They've even gone with rendering on the face. That's crazy. Of course, this next scene coming up is quite infamous among fans of the shows, including myself. Chip Chase's ability to tear a floppy disk. Those that never held a floppy disk, you don't know how durable those things were. Trust me, Chip Chase ripping a floppy disk means that he was almost like the world's strongest man. Especially the ferocity of which he tears it apart. I remember watching this episode as a kid and this next moment shocking me. I'll just let it play out.
Excellent ravage.
Yes, we hear an unprocessed Frank Welker as Soundwave, and for the first time in the series we realise that the guy that does Dr. Claw in Inspector Gadget uses the same voice for Soundwave. It was such a cool moment when I first saw that. This episode, more than most, loves to play with depth of field and change in focus. Look at this. Here we go. Look at that. And it's happened a few times in the episode already. It's a nice trick. It's funny how so much of this first season takes place in these rocky terrains. Rarely do we see cities bustling with people or other unique locations. That said, I do love the look of this first season so much. It is by far my favourite run of Transformers episodes. Really never got into season 3. But yeah, you can see in some of these shots the animation just goes from really nice to like, I'll be sure to look at how anime Chip Chase looks in these next 2 shots. Here as he's having his brain drained by Soundwave. Look at that. But this next shot, look at this. It looks like a character of Robotech there. That is Japanese influence utterly taking over the Western character model design. Also, the plan here in this episode just seems to be a little bit confusing. Like, I get that they have to sneak in order to rescue Chip Chase, but you think also a few moments later you're going to ram through the building, so why not make that your first tactic? What do I know? I'm no master tactician.
And be careful.
Ah, Rumble. He's one of my favourite characters in the series, and yes, even though I had the Rumble toy as a kid, I was always of the belief that Rumble is blue and Frenzy is red. That was a term used on the Transformers news groups back in the day. I think it was Rumble is red, Frenzy is blue, or Rumble is blue, Frenzy is red, or the other way around as well. So, yeah, I popped up on the Transformers news groups in the mid to late 90s selling UK comics to fellow fans. But yeah, I always thought Rumble was an awesome character. His power, Frank Welker's voice, he's like a little punk.
Amazing! I've generated antimatter. The key to our conquest of the universe. Bring the energon cubes.
Megatron just makes antimatter. Feels like this should be a bigger deal than I've made antimatter. What does he want to do with it as well? Ravage had a habit of knocking Chip Chase from his wheelchair. There's a weird lack of communication here amongst the Autobots. I'll talk about that as we're about to head to an act break, so let's let Megatron blow everything up apparently. I was always a tad gutted that Hound wasn't as important as he felt in those first 3 episodes, especially that scene with he and Spike. It seemed like they were building up a friendship there, and then that just kind of gets forgotten about. They touch upon it in, I think, is it SOS Dinobots, but you very rarely see the 2 interact after that. I never like this transformation of Bumblebee here where he just kind of consumes his allies. It just looks really weird.
Okay, guys, let's haul cylinders!
Yeah, just didn't really like that at all. I don't like the animation of him driving up a staircase. Megatron here says that the heroes must not escape, but at this point in the episode he has made antimatter, so bam, straight out the window. Always like that.
Where'd they come from?
There's a great edit coming up here with Optimus Prime bearing down on the camera. Look at that. Such nice animation. Rumble scream. Ah. Also, something we never really see in the series, Optimus Prime's trailer being used for his fellow Autobots. Works really, really well. For some reason, I really like the human-esque Japanese robot stylings of Sunstreaker's run here, as well as the continuity as we see the camera behind Megatron with the wall debris still falling, and we're about to end Act 1 with Megatron killing everyone, but not everyone. So yeah, we're back from the act break. So when Chip Chase was successfully rescued, why didn't he or the other Autobots reveal that Megatron had succeeded in creating antimatter? Also, when Megatron declares that the Autobots are too late and then throws an antimatter cube at them, seemingly exploding everything, why is Megatron and his group utterly unscathed in the next scene? It is good to see the Autobots all kinds of beat up, but looking at those beat up robots in disguise, they'll be lucky to make it back to the Ark. Now, even though they were present during the huge explosion, let's see how the Decepticons fared. Yeah, they're the Decepticons. They're still present. The Autobots just left. So, as the plot goes, Megatron has created antimatter, something he believes that he can rule the universe with. So what could possibly stop him? Thankfully, the plot of a Saturday morning cartoon. Back at the Ark, it always makes me chuckle that Sparkplug and Spike to a degree were highly capable of repairing these alien life forms. I get the connection, but yeah, technically they are from another planet, so I mean that is nitpicking at its finest there. I apologise. Whoever came up with the idea to have Wheeljack's ears blink is a genius. I always thought that it was an incredibly unique touch. Although, yeah, here they're blinking orange. I know in some episodes they would blink blue. Also, Wheeljack voiced by Chris Latta. Much like Sparkplug, it's closer to his real voice. Not that Starscream would be remotely close to anyone's real voice. This scene here, it feels like it's from another episode completely. Bear in mind that this clearly shows that night has fallen, but the pacing of the episode and the scenes either side of it suggest that this is all taking place during the same day. It's funny to watch these battles in earlier episodes, especially in an episode like this. We're about to see Sideswipe and Sunstreaker almost having fun fighting their Decepticon foes. And then 2 years later in production, in Transformers the movie, my goodness, the realism and presence of death in each and every battle between the Autobots and Decepticons is very, very real and very, very traumatic. One thing I always liked about this battle is how the sky is painted to be close to sunset but not quite. It's not the simple daytime sky or a bright orange sunset. It's somewhere in between, and it kind of sets the mood for the battle really nicely, I feel. Yeah, when Starscream's telling you that you're showing off, you know you're in trouble.
The one thing you show us are forgetting is me!
Yeah, the episode's animation from this point on seems to be somewhat consistent. It's almost like this third act, as it were, finds its feet. There's some really lovely animation. Look at these shots. Wow. Jazz reacting there as he... It's weird, it looks cheap as the Decepticons descend there, but that is a stylistic choice. They don't want to animate the Decepticons, you know, clumsily landing, so it's almost like they're descending to the ground with authority. And watch this shot here of Megatron transform. That is from More Than Meets the Eye Part 3, if I remember. You can tell because the background's completely different. Filmation weren't the only ones guilty of using stock footage. Okay, they used it a tad more. It's always nice to see Starscream and Megatron working together, isn't it? Megatron was such a cool looking gun as well. I owned the Megatron toy. You know, you could have him as the small revolver when you put all the extra parts on him. My goodness, it was a cool looking gun. And then they made him a tank. I've always loved this moment of Brawn throwing Optimus Prime towards Starscream. It's one of the first times we see that Brawn possesses a great deal of strength. When I was a kid, I remember recording this segment of the episode's broadcast. I watched it over and over again, to the point where I wore out the tape. I thought it was such an original action scene, and I used to recreate it with my Brawn toy and other numerous Transformers toys, as I didn't have Optimus. Boo-hoo. I could never tell when Spike drills into Skywarp's leg there if that was just merely a distraction or if it was supposed to tie into Chip Chase applying that device to his leg. Teletran 1, voiced by Casey Kasem, something I kind of forget.
Computer override accomplished. New target selected.
Spike, we did it!
It's like Wheeljack's line there, Spike, we did it! Poor Rumble. Again, it's so crazy when you think of Frank Welker as a voice actor. He's voicing in this episode Megatron, Soundwave, Skywarp, Reflector, and Rumble. It's nuts. And that's just the Decepticons. What a talented voice actor. I actually met him many years ago at the voice recording studio in Los Angeles and was blessed to watch him actually perform a recording for the most recent Garfield show at the time. It's fantastic.
We've been cheated of our victory! Decepticons, retreat!
The Decepticons are defeated once again.
Retreat!
It's a real lovely episode for Chip Chase, as most of his early appearances are, by the way. Thinking about it, wouldn't it have been cool to see Chip Chase in Transformers the movie and the episodes that came after it, seeing him interact with the later characters like Ultra Magnus, Hot Rod, RC, Springer? Saying that, I'm sure there's a Japanese comic out there that actually did follow up the character's story in the future. Maybe.
Came between me and mastery of the universe. But soon revenge and victory will be mine.
Megatron always seemed to get the final line in these early episodes. So yeah, as I mentioned before, season 1 of Transformers is just my favourite season. There's something very magical about it for me, whether it ties into nostalgia or my collecting of the toys or the comics or just the earliest days of Transformers collecting, that feeling. Maybe it just brings it back, but I love these earliest episodes where they're trying to find their feet with the series. You see with season 2 they really have an understanding of where the show is and who the characters are. But yeah, these early episodes, there's something wonderfully raw about them, wonderfully experimental. So yeah, that's the end of the commentary, folks. If you enjoyed it, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.